question is the open source software part of the open data piece, and is there a plan to share software that the city has created under an open source license? And I think the answer to that is one that you're going to have to ask the city about. The one thing I would say again, as a citizen, and the bargain is the be patient piece, which is that this motion is actually colossal in its scope, and we have to give city time to kind of digest and absorb this. And I think from the councillors at the moment are most interested in how we can get open data out there, because that's the piece that people in the room can play with the quickest. But there's a commitment again to hold the city feet to the fire around how we're going to tackle the piece around open source software.
So where does the city stand in terms of the larger issues for our region and the data sets that are shared? Have you opened a dialogue with the other municipalities?
All I can say is that the city and the other regions are going to be much more responsive to the need for that discussion if political pressure is put on elected officials to tell them that this is a priority for citizens. So if we do care about these issues, the thing that you can be doing, do not underestimate the power of an email or, more importantly, a letter to an elected official. And at the provincial level, if you get 20 letters from your constituents, that's like a major issue now. One that we need to be thinking about and having a right response to and maybe pushing the party on. It doesn't take a lot of people, especially around a written letter, to begin to shape what the interests of your elected officials are. People think that it takes an enormous, a whole lot of work. It doesn't. It doesn't mean you're going to be successful, but consistent pressure cannot be underestimated. Where am I as a politician going to prioritize my time? You've got to be in their shoes. Where would you prioritize your time? I got 20 people who care enough.
So you want us to build AI bots?
I love it. I love it. You should absolutely build an AI bot that randomly reshuffles emails to councillors so each one looks like it's unique. You would actually have a devastating impact, and I love it.
We have the technology.
I'm actually not certain that what I think is interesting is a lot of government interest in open source isn't coming because citizens are pressuring them. It's coming because it'll make sense from a financial perspective, or more often somebody kind of crawled into the organization who knew a little bit and started to kind of agitate enough and got to a place of seniority where they started to make it happen. And what I think is great is that the playing field is tilting in our favor. So I don't think we're required a huge kind of mass movement of people to push the city or to push a government is going to require the kind of force to do something from scratch. In fact, just this morning I was reading about how the Department of Homeland Security is developing a program to drive open source into state and local governments, in part because it's cheaper, but in part because I think they think the security systems around and the kind of the bugs and the openings around proprietary software are a lot more scary to them than those around open source. So the playing field, I think, is starting to move in our favor, but what can we be doing to accelerate it?
Best one that I know is the Sunlight Foundation in the United States. They've been working on open government, transparency in government for quite a few years. They're building a lot of the APIs that are starting to drive sites like data.gov, which, if you haven't seen it yet, is pretty amazing. It takes, basically the CTO of Washington has moved to the federal level and is working with Obama's administration to open up the data sets using open standards. And the Sunlight Foundation is a citizen-based group, nonprofit, that's basically working with the Obama administration to put in a lot of these principles. And they now have data.gov, where it's a very simple website, and they're just putting more and more data sets on it at the same time. They're also running another one of these, what would you like to see from our government? And so they have APIs, they have, of course, blogs and RSS feeds, but an incredible wealth of information like that. Just another comment. With regards to the city working with other municipalities, the motion does essentially direct the staff to engage in what's called the Integrated Cadastral Information Society, which is a nonprofit society set up in BC to assist municipalities to standardize and share their data amongst themselves. I don't know the history of why Vancouver hasn't joined to date. It's possibly around cost recovery issues of data, which has often prevented the sharing of data in this country, not so in the US. Fortunately, I think there's lots of economic studies that now show that cost recovery costs an institution more than they gain. And cities like Nanaimo and Kamloops recognize that, and they've just started to put their data out because processing requests cost more than just putting it out in a standard way. So I would say on your citizen apps, the city is going to face this challenge of how do you fund, say, data collection if we can't charge people for it. And a really important thing, and I think you'll probably end up seeing this in whatever licensing the city determines, is accreditation. So definitely credit the city of Vancouver for any data that you use, because that helps them justify their budgets in creating this information that you're adding value to. The second thing is use metrics wherever you can. So track how many people are using your site, track any responses, both positive and negative, because again, there's going to have to be kind of an overview in a year or two, I think, on has this really worked? And the more value that you can demonstrate has been captured, the more that the whole kind of virtuous circle is going to continue. The last thing is, ironically, ISIS doesn't share their data with the public, even though it's made up of all of the municipalities of BC. And I think this is the classic case of copyright and the issue of cost recovery again. The irony is a lot of that data is already public. Like, anyone can go to a lands title office and look at a map of who owns what. But it's a different format, and there's concerns about privacy, security. But the motion does ask the city to not only share its data with ISIS, but encourage them to do something similar as the city has now done with its motion here. So that's another case where I think pressure would be helpful to open up data provincially.
Anyone working on similar motions at the provincial or federal level?
No. Not that I know of. Oh, sorry.
Kind of thing like
Yes.
the Westford.
Yeah, sorry, so great. So Visible Government's an organization that is pushing for these outcomes. But sorry, I thought you meant from a political side. Not that I know of. But there is an organization, Visible Government, which is kind of pushing to find ways to open up data sets. And there's actually, there are probably other organizations, and if people know them, mention them, because they're not the only one as well.
Just wanted to say on that note, if you are interested in this stuff on the national level, like Visible Government has a good website. They're looking to sponsor a bunch of projects. They've got a mailing list you can get on, and it's a pretty good community that's kind of just getting started on all this stuff.
David and Tim have both mentioned the importance of creating useful things around the data. I'd like to underscore this and contrast it to lobbying. So there have been government-based initiatives on sharing data now for more than a decade, at least in digital form. The ones that have failed have typically been where the government in question took on most of the load of gathering the data, sharing with citizens, and doing useful things with it. When the political tides changed, no one really had a stake in the data as a real consumer. People would use the services, but no one would be that upset if it went away, especially in the early days. Cases where it has stuck is where someone has built something very useful to many citizens that many people care about and are engaged with. Even when that resource, that service, that data becomes politically difficult for whoever's in power, the ones that people care about stick around. So the successful example, I think, to look at is theyworkforyou.com, which tracks what members of parliament in the United Kingdom actually do. It's had very wide-reaching political consequences. You should certainly take a look at it. It's been very politically uncomfortable for some members of parliament, but it's certainly stuck because so many people now rely on it.
So when you say, a couple times you mentioned that thing tilting, quote in our favor, unquote, are you referring to the open source community, or like who do you mean? Like who's
So both. I'm referring both to the openness of data. I think that data.gov and the Obama administration has been a huge boon for those who care about open data. And there's an increasing number of municipalities that are finding their ways to open the data they share. And even here near Vancouver, Nanaimo, I think, has been way out in front in sharing data with its citizens, and I think in a really interesting way.